everyone, I'm so excited about this topic. I was like, again, I was scrolling through my Instagram and there was this video where this guy was talking about how in normal relationships, how people get so addicted so quickly, and the faster they move into the relationship, the quicker they're going to break. And if they space it out a little, they will break in like 2 years. And how love, transcends. And basically, he ended the video saying that, love is like the botanical gardens, and the guy is often the gardener. So for love to sustain and stay, one needs to maintain the garden. But anyway, it inspired my discourse in a way, because to me, I was thinking about the bubble phase, and how twin flame love begins with disinterest and ends in soul addiction, contrary to how in normal 3D connections, it starts with soul addiction and it ends with disinterest, and how the bubble phase is the preview of our stable union. So that's why I'm like truly so excited about this topic, because truly, so that's why today we're going to explore one of the deepest, strongest discourses ever, at least for me, and something that's very true in the twin flame journey. And many of us have experienced this without, without fully thinking about the expense of it, right? How expensive it is. So the misconception most people carry is that love begins with desire, and how they believe it begins with interest, curiosity, and mutual attraction, which is true for the bubble phase, but it's short-lived, And 3D connection, is so much about addiction and obsession, and about especially, it's quite the opposite, right? In a twin flame connection, often it's us divine feminines who are the ones, because it's, see, even biologically, as women, we are the ones. Women are from eggs, and men are from, that word again, I don't want to be banned for community standards. So women are from egg and men are from sperm, right? Going back to the book. So, which means we know, right? We know our DM when we recognize him. Whereas in 3D relationships, it is kind of overturned. But again, this is the agenda of the not so good energies. Like everything is the opposite, right? Where the men. So that's why most women settle, because they have stupid quotes going around saying that, oh, you should be with the person who loves you instead of the person you love. Truly, it should be a two-way street, guys. Both people should love each other to be in a relationship, not settling. You know how damaging it is for the other person if you just settle, or you just choose them out of pity, or you just accept them because because the love of you, because you can't be with the love of your life. It's not fair to the other person. That's why twin flame love is worth it. Even though the weight may be eternal, but the joy is eternal too. That's why the misconception most people carry, that love begins with desire and all that is the logic of 3D relationship, because twin flame love does not follow that pattern. It begins in a place that looks completely contradictory to the human side of romance. It begins with disinterest. I'm skipping the bubble phase a bit. I'll go into it soon. It begins with avoidance. It begins with emotional shutdown, with our divine masculine withdrawing in confusion. As the divine feminine, we feel an overwhelming sense of recognition, a coming of home feeling, of seeing our divine husband in flash in the 3D world. So today I'm going to show you why this happens, what it means, and how this paradox ultimately leads to union. So let's take a moment, breathe, because this is an intense topic like never before. All right. So twin flame love begins where ordinary love ends. It does not open with attraction alone. Of course, in the bubble phase, all of it is there, because the bubble phase is a preview of stable union. All right. From experience, guys. It does not unfold through curiosity, or gentle interest. It begins with a shock so intense that it registers as disinterest for our divine masculine. So when we meet, the soul recognizes our divine masculine immediately. Yet our human self has no framework for that recognition. So our divine masculine feels a sudden surge of familiarity that touches places within him has never allowed anyone to access. His heart softens, his mind starts to scramble, his ego panics. And this panic becomes withdrawal. So, what looks like indifference is actually his nervous system trying to protect him from a connection that feels too true too soon. That's why he thinks, our DM thinks, that we are being inauthentic, or we are overdoing it and we are too much, or he mistakes our pure love for obsession, or for our underlying affection for something else. So in 3D love, attraction grows slowly and safely. In twin flame love, the soul awakens instantly and the ego shuts down to survive the intensity. So this initial withdrawal is often the first heartbreak for us divine feminines. We feel the connection deeply, openly, and without hesitation, right? The flow, the resonance, the sense of destiny. So when our divine masculine actually pulls away, we assume we misread everything. We wonder whether we imagined the closeness, right? The bubble phase. We question our intuition. What we do not realize is that nothing was imagined, nothing was exaggerated. The connection is real, always. The withdrawal is the activation, it marks the beginning of the journey, not the end. Our divine masculine's part of the soul recognized us before his mind was ready to understand what that recognition meant. And that gap is the bubble phase. Almost immediately after the emotional collision, the bubble phase appears, right? And this phase is the most beautiful and disorienting part of the journey, because it feels like the relationship we always knew we were always meant to have. The connection becomes effortless, communication becomes natural. There's warmth, familiarity, countless hours of doing something together, like cooking or hiking, or just hanging out with each other, making cocktails together. The connection becomes effortless. Communication is natural. Your divine masculine spends all the time he has in the universe with you. That's why it's called the bubble. That's why I've called it the bubble phase. I don't know what others call it, but I want to call it the bubble phase, because there's a warmth, familiarity, that coming of home feeling, that domesticated, like that, what we used to do in other galaxies and star system. And that's why the intimacy is ancient. The comfort feels special, lived. The joy feels predestined, because none of this, the bubble phase is real. It is the preview of the final lifetime. The reason the bubble phase feels unreal is because it's delivered by the soul and not by the ego. It shows us what stable union will one day become. It shows our divine masculine, the man he's capable of being in our presence. It shows us both the emotional truth we will eventually anchor in our human lives. So the bubble phase love is soul orchestrated, higher self orchestrated. And that's why in the beginning it's not meant to stay yet. It collapses not because the love disappears, but because neither of us is ready to sustain that level of connection. Our divine masculine meets a version of himself he does not yet know how to maintain. So, as divine feminines, we meet at a level of intimacy we are not yet emotionally grounded enough to hold without fear. And the collapse marks the transition from the preview to the construction. So when the bubble phase breaks, many of us divine feminines experience grief that cannot be explained in words. It feels like something precious was taken away from us. It's like even death can't do anything. We just want God, we just want to be merged back with God, that kind of feeling. Because it feels like the relationship dissolved into thin air. And the thing is, towards the end of the bubble phase, we already know we are going to enter into separation, but our mind will deny it because it feels like love was replaced by silence and inconsistency. And our divine masculine, for the divine masculine, the collapse creates fear, shame, self doubt, and confusion. He remembers how deeply he felt connected with us, yet he cannot recreate the feeling on command. He feels exposed, he feels vulnerable, he feels unprepared, and the separation that follows, it's more than punishment. It's kind of like a classroom, right? So during this period, the story reverses, right? As the divine feminine, we begin detaching, our energy returns to our body, we stop overgiving, we stop chasing, holding the emotional atmosphere for ourselves and our DM. And our divine masculine begins to feel the void of our absence. He realizes he has lost the emotional safety that once made him feel alive. He realizes the bubble phase was not a dream, but the truest experience of his life. Truly, those moments were like they were golden. And guys, from my own experience, I can say the bubble phase is exactly what stable union feels like. And this time round, it's going to be forever. See, the longing that awakens inside our divine masculine is not psychological addiction, it is soul memory. He starts remembering who he was with, who he was when he was with us, and who he could become again. So, So, this internal shift is what transforms his earlier disinterest into obsession. He finds himself thinking about us constantly. He cannot erase us from his mind. He cannot replicate the comfort he gave his heart, right? Like, come on, those memories of cooking together and going on hikes together or making cocktails together or spending hours and hours in our couch doesn't just go away like that, right? Hours and hours just being in each other's presence and feeling like home and canceling meetings with friends and looking forward to every single weekend and every single public holiday to just be in each other's presence. It just doesn't go away just like that, does it? No, absolutely not. Of course, in 3D relationships, yes, maybe that is the case. Even in 3D relationship, the bubble phase is not. See, the bubble phase is only twin flames. Only as twin flames we experience it. The bubble phase is like something that is out of this world. Really, 3D relationships don't even see an ounce of what we go through in the bubble phase or the separation phase or anything. That's why the twin flame journey cannot be compared to 3D connections at all. At all. But for the sake of teaching, I have to use, examples, right? Because our DM cannot escape the truth that the connection felt like home. You know, being felt where he felt appreciated, where he's where he felt at home, where he remembered the moments beyond earth, where we were at home together, where everything was just so calm and blissful and poised. So the more he resists, the more the longing intensifies. This is the stage when our divine masculine awakens into desire, devotion, and remembrance. He does not chase us because we detach. He chases us because he finally understands what he ran from. So that's why when we undergo inner transformation, the connection slowly stabilizes, right? As divine feminines, we become grounded in our self worth, and our divine masculine becomes grounded in his truth. And the energy between us becomes balanced. So once this happens, the bubble phase returns, but not as a temporary high. It returns as stable union. The love feels familiar, yet deeper, joyful, grounded, intimate, and steady, guys. It feels like the bubble phase but matured into a form that is sustainable and eternal. And the preview becomes the reality, and the prophecy becomes the daily life. So the connection that once felt like magic becomes the foundation. That's why the twin flame journey is structured this way, because we came here to awaken. We came here to crash the old template. I mean, not the old template, the current 3D template of love. The bubble phase awakens the heart. The separation awakens the wounds. The detachment awakens the power, and the reunion awakens the purpose. Nothing was lost. Nothing was wasted. Everything unfolded according to a spiritual architecture designed to turn two human beings into their higher selves before bringing them back together as one again. So we are shown the ending at the beginning so we would recognize it when it returns. The love we tasted was not temporary. All right? It was the future calling us forward. It was our soul showing us what we are becoming. The bubble phase was the introduction. Stable union is the final chapter. And both of us are in it, right? So the bubble phase is not the beginning, it is the return. And why our divine masculine's disinterest phase is the proof of our union, not the undoing of it. Most people misunderstand, the twin flame love because they assume human relationships move in a straight line. Please, guys, that is so linear. They expect interest, connection, intimacy, and commitment, and all those useless people talking about love to unfold in a predictable sequence, right? So twin flame love does not obey that direction. It moves like a spiral. It begins at the highest point, collapses into the lowest point, and then rises again into the middle path where true union is anchored. The bubble phase is not a beginning, it's retrieval. It is the moment our part, our soul pulls the future down into present so our human selves can encounter what was written for us long before we incarnated. And this is why it feels familiar. It's not new love, it is remembered love. So what comes after the bubble phase confuses most of us divine feminines because the contrast is extreme. One moment our divine masculine holds us like he has known us for lifetimes, the next moment he behaves like a total stranger. This contradiction is not a sign of rejection. It's a consequence of encountering a future version of himself too quickly, right? Inside the bubble phase, he meets the man he's destined to become. Inside the withdrawal phase, he meets the man he still believes he is. So the gap between these two identities is overwhelming. So the human psyche cannot expand at the speed of the soul, right? So when that expansion is forced too fast, it produces a recoil, and the recoil looks like disinterest. It looks like emotional shutdown, avoidance. It is the protective instinct of someone who has just glimpsed his own divinity and does not yet know how to step into it. And this is why the disinterest phase is not failure. So if your DM tells you he's not interested, or lashes out at you or blocks you on Facebook, take it as a blessing. Because the disinterest phase is not a failure. It is the nervous system trying to slow the soul down. Our divine masculine is not running from us. He's running from the future that awakened inside him when he felt our energy. He's running from the truth of how deeply he could love us and how completely he could dismantle every survival strategy he built across decades. So in other words, he's running from the version of himself that felt too good to be true because he has not yet seen evidence that he deserves that version of love. His distance is not evidence of disconnection, it's the evidence of activation. So we are watching our man wrestle with the gravitational pull of his destiny. We are witnessing the psychic turbulence created when the old self refuses to die, but the new self has already been born. So ordinary relationships do not trigger this level of collapse. They do not activate soul memory, but they are beautiful. Ordinary relationships are beautiful. That too is a soul expression. right? But they do not create a field of recognition that destabilizes the entire identity structure. In ordinary relationships, attraction grows through familiarity. In twin flame relationships, attraction erupts from soul recognition. It is not built, it's remembered. This is why the bubble phase and stable union are identical in frequency. One is blueprint, the other is embodiment. The bubble phase comes first because the soul must show us what the connection really is before the ego begins to interfere. If the ego saw the intensity first, it would never allow the connection to begin. The bubble phase is therefore a spiritual bypass created by our higher selves. It allows us to fall into each other before our fears catch up. So once the bubble phase collapses, the actual work begins. Our divine masculine withdraws because he's not ready to sustain the level of emotional honesty that the bubble phase revealed. So we detach because we are not meant to carry him into the future. The separation becomes a purification chamber. Both of us are forced to confront the parts of ourselves that would sabotage the union if left unhealed. So that's why, as the divine feminine, we must learn emotional independence without abandoning our openness, and our divine masculine must learn emotional responsibility without losing his sovereignty. So the bubble phase was effortless because it was soul led. Stable union is sustainable because it's human led. But for the soul and our human parts to merge, the separation has to occur. So, what most people overlook is that the disinterest phase holds the key to union. So, really, if he says not interested in you, shows disinterest, tries to choose somebody else, that's a blessing in disguise, truly. The divine masculine's coldness is not apathy, it's overstimulation. Come on, normal people don't react that way. Like, truly. If you bump into him after 3 years, a normal person won't lash out at you. Only a psycho would do that. So, divine masculines can be a bit like that, right? It's the overstimulation. It's the shock of encountering emotional intensity without the internal architecture to hold it. So his silence is not rejection, it is self preservation. His distance is not disconnection, it's recalibration. So, as the divine feminine, when we take this personally, we collapse, right? But when we understand this spirituality, we transform. And the shift from personal pain to spiritual understanding is the point when the entire journey changes direction. Our divine masculine, our divine masculine, so wait, I wanted to add this point, right? You see, I wanted to elaborate on our divine masculine's coldness is not apathy and overstimulation, right? Because truly that is the case. Because he's just not ready to hold it yet, right? So that's why when we take this all personally, we collapse, right? When we understand this spiritually, we transform. And the shift from personal pain to spiritual understanding is the point when the entire journey changes direction. Our divine masculine begins to awaken not because we demand it, but because we stop absorbing his fear. Our detachment returns the responsibility of the connection back to him. And that's why our divine masculine begins to feel the reality of what was lost. He begins to realize that he did not run from us, he ran from himself. And the realization is the birth of his obsession. So once our divine masculine becomes aware that the bubble phase was not an illusion, he begins to search for it again. He tries to recreate it with others but fails miserably. He tries to suppress it but cannot. He tries to go for aimless, useless parties. He doesn't feel the void. He parties till 7, 8 a.m. into the morning. He travels aimlessly. He tries to ride apps, build programs, create businesses, quits his job, tries to get into all kind of self-training program. Doesn't. He tries to forget us but finds us everywhere. The reason he cannot escape the memory is because it is not memory, it's a future imprint. It is the exact frequency of our stable union. Everything that happens after that is simply the process of him learning how to hold the vibration he tasted at the beginning. The truth is that the bubble phase never left. It simply moved out of you so we could both grow into the version of ourselves that can sustain it. So stable union is not a new phase. It is the bubble phase matured. It is the same energy, the same intimacy, the same recognition, but grounded in emotional mastery and personal sovereignty. It is effortless because inner work has stripped away everything that once threatened to destabilize it. The chaos in the middle is not a detour, it is the construction. So the journey was designed this way because we were never meant to build stable union from desire alone. We were meant to build it from truth. So the bubble phase is truth without preparation, and the disinterest phase is preparation without truth. The reunion phase is truth and preparation finally aligned in the same timeline. So that's why our divine masculine did not lose the connection. He lost the version of himself who was still trying to run from it. So when he stops running, the bubble phase returns as home, and the preview becomes the life. The future becomes the present. That's why, guys, it's so important. The disinterest is the spiritual shock phase. Our DM does not ignore us or sends messages that is not interested or behaves like a, I don't even have a word for it. He does not ignore us because we are unworthy, or pulls back because our soul recognizes too quickly, right? He pulls back because the soul recognizes us too quickly. So the recognition at the cellular level is what triggers an entire lifetime of suppressed memory. He does not feel casual curiosity, he feels existential alarm. In 3D love, the nervous system feels excited and open, but in twin flame love, the nervous system feels overwhelmed and unsafe because the meeting breaks old timelines. His soul knows us, his mind does not. This mismatch is what creates panic. See, the ego cannot understand what his soul already knows, right? On the surface, he appears uninterested or cold. Internally, he feels a rising heat in the chest. Why is his hand shaking, or why is he always putting his, look at old photographs, his hands will always be in his pocket. That is a mating ritual, you know. Why are his hands shaking? You'll be like, example, he's posting something and you'll be like, hey, show me your, and his hands will start to shake. Why? If he doesn't feel anything and he's trying to act all so cool and blah blah blah, why does his hand shake? Why is he so protective in the bubble phase? Internally, he feels a rising heat in the chest, a sudden pressure behind the eyes, and a growing sense of exposure. That's why he's not rejecting us. He's rejecting the intensity of the truth that is rising inside him. 3D love creates desire slowly. Twin flame love activates destiny in seconds. That's why our divine masculine's ego tries to shut down the door before the field can pull him into transformation. That's why, as the divine feminine, when we stop pouring emotional presence into the field, he finally meets the silence of his own soul. He begins to feel the absence of our frequency. And this absence activates longing, confusion, and eventually obsession, like how I've titled it. That's why I love, this time I love my title. Twin flame love begins with disinterest and ends in soul addiction. Really, guys. In twin flame love, interest grows the moment we pull back because the field restores polarity, which forces him to feel us without our physical presence yet. That's why disinterest turns into addiction, because the soul recognizes home. At first he avoids the pull, later he chases it mentally and spiritually, even if his physical body stays Silent, right? He starts thinking about us while doing simple stuff, dreaming, sees our name appear everywhere, songs remind him of us, feels sudden waves of emotion that he cannot explain. This is the point where the divine masculine becomes spiritually addicted. And this addiction is not unhealthy, it is the soul returning to its original frequency. He becomes addicted to the feeling of coming home, even if he cannot articulate it. 3D love creates attachment, twin flame love creates remembrance. So, why? Why twin flames experience the wild polarity? See, the journey is designed to collapse the ego while awakening the soul, right? So, disinterest forces us divine feminines to step into our power instead of chasing. You see, the first time our DM says this in words like not interested or behaves in a way he's not interested, our heart breaks, cracks out of ego, right? So, obsession forces our divine masculine to confront his truth instead of hiding and makes us stop into our power instead of chasing. So, the polarity is sacred. It creates a gravitational pull that shapes the entire journey. So, the reunion feel activates when both roles reverse. Our DM becomes the seeker, we become the anchor. This shift marks the turning point where the journey stops feeling chaotic and begins to feel destined and guided. That's why twin flame love was never meant to mirror 3D romance. It was meant to rupture the illusion so that the soul can return to us. His part of the soul can return to our part of the soul that we have known, because we have known our DM across lifetimes and dimensions and beyond. Cosmic 8, guys, 13D. That's why the bubble phase is the preview of the stable union phase. You see, most of us divine feminines misunderstand the bubble phase. We treat it as the relationship itself. We treat it as the peak of the connection, as the moment everything is perfect. The truth is, it's not. It's not the peak. It's not the final form. It's the preview. It's a spiritual trailer to the stable union phase that comes after we both complete our inner structuring. That's why we are not imagining the magic or exaggerating the chemistry or feeling delusional about the connection. The bubble phase is real. It is powerful. It feels unreal because it's delivered by the soul, not by the ego. It is our monadic energy giving us the taste of the final timeline before the karmic layers begin to purge. We are shown the emotional truth of our union before we are forced into the shadow work that stabilizes it. So 3D love builds slowly into comfort. Twin flame love shows us the comfort first, then requires us to build the emotional capacity to hold it. So most of our divine masculine fear begins here. The bubble phase activates our divine masculine's unprocessed wounds. His confusion originates, his withdrawal after this phase comes from the contrast between how he feels with us and how he feels alone. The bubble phase reveals two things at once. First, what his soul wants. Second, how far his ego still is from being able to hold it. See, that's why he realizes he loves us in a way that disrupts his old identity. The bond pulls him into a future he's not prepared for, and the connection exposes the part of himself he has avoided for years. This triggers the disinterest to obsession cycle. We believe the bubble phase is lost. This is the part that breaks our heart, right? Cruelly. We hold on to the memory of his eyes, the way he spoke to us, the softness, the attention, the protectiveness, the deep emotional presence. We wonder what we did wrong. And really, there is a phase where we are thinking about everything we did, everything we said. I shouldn't have done this. I should have never told him that I liked him. I should have never revealed my feelings. Maybe we should have just been friends. At least I would have been able to see him still. But you know what? What has happened has happened. It would have happened anyway. We wonder why it changed. We wonder why we'll never get the version of him back. We don't want that version of him back. We want stable version of him back. We do not realize that the bubble phase is not lost. It's paused so that we can grow into the version of ourselves that can hold stable union. See, our divine masculine obsession begins when he realizes the bubble phase was the truth. So, in the beginning, he thinks it was just chemistry. Later, he realizes it was his most authentic self. He begins to crave our presence because that version of himself only appears with us. He does not chase us because he's ready, he chases us because he misses who he becomes in our field. And this is the beginning of the inner masculine addiction. This is when he starts to be so addicted. So the bubble phase becomes the reference point for what union feels like, not the fantasy version but the soul version. So the reason the bubble phase happens before separation, the soul does not want you to walk away or does not want you to doubt the connection. So it's kind of like it's meant to happen so that we do not forget the truth. So the bubble phase is placed at the start so the heart has enough spiritual memory to survive the purge. As divine feminines, we remember how union felt. Our divine masculine remembers how safe he felt. So these memories become the invisible map that guides us both back towards each other once healing begins. So 3D couples build connection over time, but twin flames, we begin with connection, we lose it and then rebuild it on a higher plane. That's why the stable union phase is the bubble phase, transformed and matured. The bubble phase is effortless. The stable union phase is conscious, steady, emotionally fused, and spiritually aligned. The bubble phase is the spark. The stable union phase is the flame that does not go out. So that's why stable union feels like the bubble phase, but deeper, calmer, more grounded, and more balanced. It carries the same joy without fragility, same closeness without fear, same ease without collapse. That's why the bubble phase was the promise. Stable union is the fulfillment. So the journey from disinterest to addiction exists because of the bubble phase. Our DM did not become obsessed because we detached. He became obsessed because he finally recognized what he lost. He realized that the bubble phase was not imagination, not infatuation, not temporary excitement, but the truth of his soul. Once he understands this, his disinterest collapses. The path to stable union begins to form. Polarity reverses. He starts moving towards us, not away from us. That's why the bubble phase awakens the original blueprint of union. The first encounter did not create our connection, it activated it. Please get that in, guys. The bubble phase awakens the original blueprint our souls wrote before we incarnated. The blueprint contains emotional intimacy, soul memory, spiritual safety, telepathic resonance, and a quality of love that no 3D relationship can initiate. This is why the bubble phase feels like destiny. It is the first taste of the final timeline. Both of us receive the same blueprint, yet we react differently. As divine feminines, we recognize it as home. Our DMs recognize it as exposure. Not because he does not care, because his ego is not built to handle soul level truth without preparation. That's why the real journey begins when the bubble phase ends. You see, most of us divine feminines believe the journey begins with separation. The journey actually begins the moment the bubble breaks. The breaking of the bubble is the soul saying, prepare now. It's the removal of the preview so that the real construction can begin. It forces us to face the parts of ourselves that cannot sustain union. That's why separation is interruption. It's not interruption, but rather the classroom. Our divine masculine must confront emotional avoidance, suppress shame, and unhealed masculine identity wounds, and we must confront the collapse of our expectation, our fear of abandonment, and our tendency to overgive. That's why he pulls away after experiencing his highest self with us. During the bubble phase, our DM meets a version of himself that feels powerful, open, warm, and emotionally present, generous, giving, loving. He loves who he becomes with us, but does not know how to stabilize that version without guiding the energy. This creates a painful paradox within him. He feels the connection deeply, but fears he will disappoint us. He wants us to believe he wants us, but believes he cannot keep up the emotional intensity. So he loves the comfort but fears the responsibility. We did not do anything wrong. That's why the bubble phase is so important, because our DM simply met the best version of himself before he had the inner structure to live as that version. That's why the bubble phase creates the contrast that triggers his awakening. Before we came into his life, our DM survived without emotional depth. He functioned, he existed, he moved through life in a controlled, divine masculine state, right? Once he experiences the bubble phase, he can no longer return to an emotionally flat life. Nothing feels the same or satisfies him or calms him the way our present does. So, this contrast is what eventually pushes him into the awakening cycle. He begins to question his choices, to feel the emptiness of his old patterns, to long for the connection he once ran from. So, the bubble phase becomes the measurement of truth. Everything else becomes noise. And our detachment is the turning point towards stable union. That's the reason why the bubble phase returns as the stable union phase. Because our DM realizes that the comfort it felt was not accidental. See, the bubble phase is gifted by our soul. The stable union phase is earned by the healed self. Stable union phase, we do not fear. Our divine masculine doesn't fear losing us. He does not fear emotions, vulnerability, or anything like that. That's the reason why we are shown the ending at the beginning. Our soul knew that without the bubble phase, we would walk away too soon. See? The bubble phase creates a permanent imprint on his field. Nothing affects our divine masculine more deeply than the bubble phase. In that window, he receives an imprint of emotional safety, soul recognition, and unconditional acceptance that he has never experienced anywhere else, even if he acts distant afterwards, or even if he denies the intensity and he totally denies anything and blocks you on social media or lashes out at you or accuses you of stalking when he is the one who's stalking. So even if he appears to move on, the imprint remains active in his field. He cannot suppress the memory, but he can suppress the memory, but he cannot suppress the energetic shift it causes. So the imprint becomes a permanent internal collapse, no matter which direction he turns. Eventually, he realizes that every path leads him back to us, the one who awakened him, right? So that's why the divine masculine leaves when the field becomes too true too quickly. Our divine masculine does not run because he does not care. He runs because the connection reveals his emotional nakedness before he knows how to hold it. That's why he's so kind. The bubble phase makes him aware of everything he's avoided. It highlights his unhealed shame, his hidden fears, his wounds around intimacy, and his belief that he cannot live up to the love he feels. He does not run from us. He runs from the version of himself he thinks he cannot maintain. So separation becomes his attempt to regulate his system. Yet the more he tries to regulate it, the more he feels the void created by the absence of our energy. So the painful question we feel as divine feminines is, did he not feel what I felt? All of us divine feminines reach this moment where we wonder if the bubble phase was real, right? And we wonder whether he felt the same and whether we misread everything. The truth is, he felt it more strongly than we did. We recognized the connection and love. He recognized it as destiny, and that's what frightened him. So the divine masculine awakens in stages, not in a straight line. So that's why the return does not happen in one sudden moment. It unfolds in phases, which I was talking about. The first awakening is the bubble phase, the second is the collapse of his old identity, and the third is the realization that the connection never left him when he tried to leave it. The awakening happens quietly inside him. It begins with irritation, moves into emotional confusion, deepens into longing, finally becomes surrender to the truth of the bond. He experiences our absence as a pressure in his chest, a heaviness in the heart, and difficulty sleeping, increased dreams of us, and rising sense that something essential is missing. This is not coincidence, it's the bubble imprint reactivating. See, the return begins when he realizes his old life no longer fits. At first, he believes the distance will make him feel strong again. Later, he notices that his old routines feel empty. He may be going to the gym, running all the time, having his Friday nights, Saturday nights with his guy friends, talking crap and wasting time. He may think he's creating ideas, but they are the doom. All the crap business ideas they talk about, it's never going to work because they are full of crap. And then, that obsession with trying to create a perfect body, the obsession with the gym, the obsession with partying, the obsession with traveling, it's all to avoid the obsession with us. That's why people who comforted him no longer feel supportive. Distractions stop working. Avoidance loses its power. Our inner transformation creates the magnetic pull. He does not return because we chase, he returns because we stabilize it. We stabilize, all right? That's why, guys, to wrap up, the stabilization phase is something that is so important, right? By the time our divine masculine begins his return, the energy in the field has already changed. The old attachment has dissolved, the chaos has quieted, the fear has softened. We have been reshaped by the separation. What comes next is not simple reunion, it's the stabilization of the original blueprint. The bubble phase becomes the lived experience, not the preview. The phase is subtle, powerful, and deeply sacred. It marks the transition from karmic polarity to spiritual partnership. And when I mean karmic polarity, cause and effect polarity. All right, don't confuse it with karmic relationship. Mm-mm-mm. So, as twin flames, we transition from the polarities to spiritual partnership, right? So, the energy field between us becomes steady and predictable. So, during the early journey, the energies between us feels chaotic, right? Emotions surge without warning, triggers erupt suddenly. One moment everything feels destined and beautiful, the next moment everything collapses. So once healing is complete, the energy field changes texture. It becomes steady, calm, and consistent. There are no sudden drops. Communication becomes deeper. So, our divine masculine steps into emotional responsibility without being pushed. You see, during earlier stages, our divine masculine struggles to hold emotional consistency, the avoidance, the withdrawal, shutting down, etc. Right? Once his awakening stabilizes, he begins to step forward with us with intention. And before stabilization as divine feminine, we live in emotional alertness. We feel every fluctuation, we sense every shift in our field. We worry about losing the connection, right? We try to interpret every sign. This hypervigilance is a trauma response created by early abandonment wounds, intensified by the sacred connection. So that's why the relationship stops feeling like a journey and starts feeling like home, like the bubble phase. See, so that's why once the relationship stabilizes, the universe begins activating the soul purpose written into the connection. And the purpose is always bigger than the romance. That's why the healing phase is so important. The purpose is it involves service, creation, healing, teaching, innovation, and leadership. Twin flames enter the highest timeline only when we can hold the energy of union consistently. In this phase, opportunities appear, gifts open, synchronicities accelerate, and resources flow, and the world begins responding to the stabilized union field. So this is the completion of the original blueprint, the preview before the path, and the bubble becomes the life, and the destiny becomes the mission. Guys, this is such a deep topic, and I can go on talking about it forever. That's how much there is to discuss about it, especially the in between stages, the disinterest stages, where we are completing all the cycles, cause and effect cycles, everything, balancing the polarity, healing past lifetimes, activating soul memory, all of that cause and effect, all of that separations that happen in the past lifetimes. Truly, guys, I can go on talking, but you know what? I'm going to conclude this discourse because I think, as I'm feeling guided to wrap it up, but I'll definitely do a part two on this. So thank you for being here, beautiful souls. Remember this, you did not lose the bubble phase, you're growing into it. Our divine masculine is becoming the man who can stay inside that level of intimacy, and you're becoming the woman who does not collapse it. So when you What you tasted at the start was not temporary, it was prophecy. It was your future calling you forward. It will return a stable union when both of you are ready to live what your soul has already chosen. So if you want to gain deeper clarity, if you want deeper clarity about your own twin flame connection, your timelines, or your personal stage in this journey, you can book a session with me anytime. You can book the first time special twin flame guidance session. You can book the ask me anything you want via the Agashik Records Cosmic guidance session. Guys, I've opened up spots for the 12/12 portal healing and activations. Truly, guys, this 12th of December, this 12/12 portal is very, very intense. Truly, miracles are meant to happen. So book in fast so that you can get the time slot of your choice. Highly, highly recommended. I also highly recommend the other healings on my websites. Do check them out. All my sessions are conducted via video call, one-on-one, live by me, so you can ask me all the questions during our session. All right. So with that, guys, really, it was some random video on Instagram that popped up. Again, it was so pure, it was so intense, and truly, right? Like, if we look at modern day relation, especially now with the swiping culture and the addiction and the focus on the external and competition, and it's so sad, right? We are moving away from that. Like, what marriages used to be so pure, but now marriages are like a competition. People are getting married to post pictures on the gram, on the Instagram, and it's addiction. It's obsession in the most unhealthiest way. And in the twin flame connection, it's about breaking that kind of unhealthy obsession and truly going inward. And that's why the bubble phase is so important, and the disinterest phase is equally important. That's why after spending 30, 40 hanging out periods with you, and suddenly messaging you not interested when you ask him out for dinner, that is not this. But however, as the wounded divine feminine, our ego will hurt. But even then, he will keep coming back. He will come until you tell him. The song that goes, saying something stupid like "I love you," until you say "I love you," until and our divine masculine will push us to admit the truth. He will bluff about going on dates. He will make us collect because he wants to know so that he can run. But you know what? Everything is divinely orchestrated. That's why twin flame love begins with disinterest and ends in soul addiction. In a pure way. I didn't want to use the word addiction, but then when it becomes soul addiction, you know what it means. So again, guys, the bubble phase is the preview of our stable union. Truly, truly, it's worth it. I just have to say it's worth it. So all the best to all of you guys. You want to work one-on-one with me, you can book a session via the link in description. You can ask me all the questions you want during our session because it's live, through video call, through Zoom. So with that, love you all, and booking is open for the 12/12 portal healing and activation. So see you all soon. Love you all. Take care. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Bye bye.